We talked about how things seem to be moving in the right direction, how kids seem to be understanding a lot of these things because of the way our culture and media is addressing them. But when we're talking specifically about sex ed, I'm really curious about, you know, the horror stories I'm hearing coming out of schools, out of our state legislature. It feels like we're more focused on who's peeing in which bathroom than we are in actually empowering and educating children.
And abstinence-only education, which, as we know, is not education.
Yeah. It's been proven ineffective
Yeah.
many times over in terms of the research. So,
am I right to feel like things are going pretty poorly right now, or where are things headed?
So yes, politics, of course, drive this in a lot of ways. And, you know, us being here in Texas, we are at a disadvantage, even though Austin kind of can be in its own little bubble, but still, in terms of Texas, we are... So I have a few stats that I'd like to share with you, because
nothing a skeptic loves more than like a good metric measure. Give us some stats.
Yeah. So these come from the Guttmacher Institute. So if anyone wants to check them out, but essentially, remember, how many states do we have? Let's set that straight first.
50.
Oh, okay, yes. I was like, are you actually asking this question? Okay.
I just want to say before I say all of these, reminding us of how many states we have, because it's going to get sad really quickly here.
Oh, okay.
So 50 states, right? We're all good with that? All right. So 24 states plus the District of Columbia mandate sex ed. Okay. So that means it's not mandatory, right? And Texas does not mandate sex ed. So it's not mandatory to have sex ed in
automatically
schools.
In the bottom half there.
Exactly, as per usual. And so, And so, so it's not mandatory for schools to have sexuality education for young people. So keep that in mind. Only 13 states require that the sex ed that is taught is medically accurate.
Oh my.
Okay, only 13
states. What does sex ed look like when it's not medically accurate?
It is, it's not.
Probably, it sounds like most of the sex ed that's being taught.
And that's where you can have maybe things that are more values-based, religion, comes into play in terms of, just the inaccuracies are wild. So only 13, and Texas does not require that it's medically accurate. So then 18 states require, including District of Columbia, require that contraceptive options are taught. So only 18 states, right?
Oh, okie dokie.
Yeah, so no one needs to know about contraception.
Yeah, talking about sex without talking about contraception, that makes total sense.
Yeah. Because what they're going for often is abstinence, right? And so when it comes to abstinence, 27, so that's when the number gets higher, 27 states require that the sex ed stresses abstinence. And that's where Texas says yes. Texas says yes,
glad we came to the conversation for that one.
Yes.
Yeah, glad we really caught up on the... Okay.
No bueno. And then 18 states require instruction on the importance of sex only within the context of marriage. So 18 states, right? No sex outside of marriage. I know this is not a happy conversation. Then 9 states, again, we have 50, right? So 9 states require sexual orientation to be inclusive. Only 9 states, right? And then there are 3 states that require negative information around sexual orientation. And Texas is one of those 3 states. Okay.
So that means that they're explicitly not allowed to discuss orientation issues? Or?
So when they do discuss sexual orientation, it has a negative, so it's not.
It has to have a negative connotation.
Yeah, that it's not positively presented. This is not something that they're advocating for, that the curriculum will advocate for in the public schools. Now, I will say this caveat. This means that a lot of schools in Texas are not teaching sex ed at all. And if they are teaching sex ed, then within the school health advisory councils, the SHACs is what they're called, there can be a lot of advocacy done by parents or by the community to try to get certain curricula in, but these are the
a more liberal community.
Population,
more progressive, so we definitely have conservative lean, and then in terms of just kind of, under the Trump administration, they're, moving away from what the teen pregnancy prevention, which was what the Obama administration had, and more, into what they're calling sexual risk avoidance.
Which just means abstinence.
Yeah, which essentially means that, they want sexuality educators to teach teens not to have sex. So it's like DARE for sex.
Right.
Because that worked out so well for drugs to begin with.
Right. So just some stats.
Come on, U.S., get your head out of your ass. Come on.
Yeah, so those are obviously some devastating factoids. But what I guess I'm wondering is, how do they compare to, say, 10 or 20 years ago? I mean, is there any room for hope? Is there positive growth of any kind?
Yeah. I mean, we have the hope of moving in a better direction. There are a lot of comprehensive sexuality education curriculums that can be integrated either privately. There's a lot more awareness, so a lot of families are moving outside of just relying on the public school system. And so there are a lot of community-based organizations or programs being taught privately through those and through nonprofit organizations. And so there's much more of like a grassroots effort happening, because again, we have a lot of adults who are acknowledging that the sex ed that they got that was very fear-based, that was showing these horrific pictures of STIs,
right.
Which I tell my students all the time. I say, what's the most common symptom of an STI? Do y'all know the answer to that? What's the most common symptom of an STI?
If you actually present with a symptom.
Yeah, so no symptom at all.
Yeah, basically.
That's the most common symptom. So when we're showing these pictures, of these outbreaks.
Warts and boils.
Right.
And, yeah.
When we're showing these pictures, then we are setting an unsafe and unrealistic expectation, because then there's that whole perception, again, of clean. I don't like to use that. It's very sex negative.
Sure.
But, this perception of like, well, you don't look like you have anything.
So you must be fine.
Yeah, I don't look like I have anything. And so it's just breaking down these myths and these taboos and helping them to understand. And especially with porn is just such an accessible tool that is available. Mainstream porn. There's a lot of great, wonderful, beautiful, ethical porn being made right now. But that's not the stuff that's free. That's not the
stuff that teenagers are finding.
Exactly. Right. And so then they're searching for these things. This is where they're learning about this. In my time, it was like HBO Real Sex. I don't know if y'all saw that show.
Oh yeah. No, I remember.
Yeah. So that was my sex ed, because I did have sex was not a topic that was talked about. It was shamed. But now they have porn, and they all have phones, they all have devices, they have iPads. If they don't have it, and you think as a parent I have good expectations and monitoring on my devices, rest assured, if they go to school outside the home, there are kids that have these.
They're being confronted with it one way or the other.
Exactly. So we have to have these conversations and make it normalized and safe for them to talk about these things with trusted adults.
And knowledgeable adults.
Yes. Which adults of present day have, I always say, have some self-compassion. Again, many of us did not have quality, comprehensive, supportive, inclusive sex ed. And so there's a bit of a learning curve. It's okay. There's no script or there's no set way that you have to talk about these things. Just get the conversation started. And books are such a great way to help support the conversation. There are also YouTube. There's amaze.org, amaze.org, and they have a YouTube channel, and they create these really great sex-positive cartoon videos around different topics for teens and tweens and young children. And so there are lots of resources and tools, so parents shouldn't feel like they have to say just the right thing. Just say something.
Well, yeah, and as hesitant as I'm sure a lot of parents are in, sharing these videos and, is my kid old enough for this? And those are, I think, important conversations to have, and a lot of discernment is required. But it's, I think, worth noticing that a lot of these teenagers are already looking at Pornhub, so providing them with a YouTube link shouldn't be something we're as hesitant about as we are.
Right. Exactly. They're going to go find these things on their own, these other things. So we want to give them the resources that are trusted, that are reliable, that are medically accurate. They're already online. Might as well point them, in the right direction and make it safe for them to be able to do that, because we're just not going to be with them all the time.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. Just to say, as disappointing as sex ed in schools seems to be right now, I mean, would you push people towards finding one of those, third-party outside classes? Is that the direction that we should be moving as a society? Is that something that you think is sort of a stopgap for right now? What do you see for the future?
Yeah, I think that parents definitely, if you have kids that are in any kind of school system, then it's really important that you get to know what is my child being taught around these different topics. Sometimes it's just a health class, but not maybe a set curriculum around sex ed or sexuality. And so you won't know until you find out from your particular school. So that's kind of number one, is find out what are they learning and at what point. Because that's the other thing, is that when programs are being taught, many times they're being taught late in the game.
That's right. When you said 12th grade, when you were referencing what grades you work with, I was like, wow, damn, that is pretty freaking late. I mean, I'll say these particular students received the curriculum also in 10th grade. And so this is, I'll give a lot of props to this particular school. It's a charter school. The program that I teach with teaches in charter schools because it is a little bit more of a progressive curriculum. And so it's a little too progressive for the public schools. But they are just so excited to have us there. And so they're like, we want to get these seniors, even though they had this, 2 years ago, we want to get them now again while they're actually, many of them, in sexual decision making, and before they head off to college, because then college is where
doors open. Yeah, all of a sudden there are
everything.
options.
And then there's just not the same level of support or consistent access to information. They might have like the condoms sitting out of the student health center, or you have to like go somewhere to get this information.
Actively go to get it.
Right. But otherwise, it's kind of all around you, these options and these decisions and this independence, and what do you do with it? So my daughter goes to UT San Antonio, and she definitely affirms the fact that, they're not really talking. In college, these conversations aren't happening as much as they are, but the temptation is certainly, there. And there are a lot of young people who are entering
in the
without
need.
any context.